Well, hello out there in YouTube land. This is Jay Kloddick again. And for today's episode, I would like to talk about a model that I built a few years ago. But I thought I would showcase it right now, mainly because there are several members of the SMA Guild and also Starship Modeler who are building Millennium Falcons as part of a group build. I would like to take part, but, well, I built this one a few years ago, and I haven't quite worked up the nerve to build another one yet. But I thought I would showcase some of what I did with my model. And if any of you watching or working on a Falcon as part of that group build, it might give you some ideas for improving the kit or doing whatever. Anyway, what you see in front of you is the 1/72nd scale Millennium Falcon. This is the kit from Fine Molds. Fine Molds is a company in Japan. They started out several years ago. I believe most of their toolers and designers originally started work for Hasegawa, but they decided to form their own company. And initially, they started out with World War II aircraft subjects, but starting out in about 2000, 2001, they decided to pursue and were successful in obtaining a license for Star Wars. Started with a X-Wing fighter, then they did a TIE fighter, and then they moved on. Finally, in 2005, they produced what at the time was the most expensive licensed kit in the world that I'm aware of, at least licensed styrene kit. And that is the Millennium Falcon in 1/72 scale. Not only that, the kit is also a record setter in terms of the number of parts. This thing has over 800 parts in it. Because when you build it up just like the studio models. You have relatively flat hull sections, and you have to put individual detail pieces on and layer them. Paint them. It produces a really nice effect compared to kits that might have the detail molded onto it. Took me about 1 month to assemble this kit, and well, about another month to paint the kit, and by 1 month that was working about maybe 2 hours a night over a 4-week period. First thing I will point out when assembling one of these is it's very important to keep track of your work. Reason being is with 800 pieces it can be very easy to lose track of where you are. One thing that helped me on my build was I took a highlighter to the instruction sheet, so when I put a part on I would cross that part off of the instruction sheet with the highlighter, and as I got done with the step I would also cross off the step as well, so that way I didn't go back and wonder if I had put something on, but all you had to do was just check the cheat sheet and I knew it was there. Another thing that helped as well was I didn't start with the cockpit like the instructions have you do. The beauty of this kit is you can build several of the parts up before you even add the cockpit, mainly because the main cockpit assembly doesn't get added until relatively late. In fact, one thing which I will demonstrate which makes it easier to transport this model is I didn't even glue the cockpit on. It's friction fit, fits on very well. Thing that's clever about that little idea is if you so desire, you could probably mount a power switch right here for an internal light system and just put the cockpit on there and you'd have the lights on. You don't have to worry about an exposed switch. It's big enough too that you could probably stick a 9-volt battery terminal in there as well. And you'd still have the ability to lower the ramp, put all the lights in that you want. Let's take a little close look at the cockpit here. As you notice, there is no glass in the cockpit. That's because the original Star Wars studio models did not use any clear transparency pieces, mainly because they could produce reflections in the camera and wreck the shot. Let's put the cockpit back in. Lines on there very nicely. At least it would if I was holding this thing with two hands, but here I am trying to keep the cockpit on while I'm talking. There we go. Slots right in every time. It's a nice friction fit. I can even turn this model upside down and I know that cockpit's not going to come off. The gun turrets are also friction fitted on. I also did not glue the turret guns either, so I could actually move them up like they're in a defensive posture. And the way it works is the head of the gunner would be facing this direction, his feet would be going this way. Only thing that really sucks about the whole assembly is that this particular model is based on the 32-inch studio model built for Empire Strikes Back, and when ILM built that model, they had this little flange just underneath the hatch window, or underneath the turret gun window, and as a result you can't really see anything in there when you put it in. And, well, I put decals on the walls and stuff to detail it nice, even painted the gunnery chairs really nice. Well, you can't see that. Now, if you cut that flange off that sits under the window, then you can see more of it. But even then, you're probably not going to see all that much unless you put a lighting system in there. Now, let's turn around back here. The rear end. These, quote, solar collectors, unquote, I believe is what they're called. Anyway, a lot of people like to airbrush these. I do not. Specifically the burn marks right here. Reason being is every time I've ever seen anybody airbrush these, they tend to do them a little too dark and make the Falcon looks like it's diesel powered, you know, as you got that big disgusting black smoke coming out of there. I went for a more subtle look, so my technique was to use ground up pastel chalks, not just black in shade, but also several of the gray shades. Applying it in layers, building it up. At one point right here, I got a little too dark on what I wanted, so I actually had to go back in and respray that area with my base coat in order to bring it back in. The way I painted this model was I started with a flat black pre-shade, and then I painted over the top with gray shades. Initially I tried using the light gray color that was recommended by FineMolds. However, the pre-shade kind of turned that color a little too blue. So I went back, did the math again, came across another YouTube video done by a master modeler in Japan, and he had a paint formula recommendation of a 50-50 mixture of Federal Standard Light Gray and Federal Standard Camouflage Gray. I can't remember the actual FS numbers. Check the details for the video. I'll probably have the numbers there. But so I said, okay, if he was able to do it with Gunsy shades, well, I can obtain those shades pretty easily. So I took Testors Model Master brand Camouflage Gray and Testors Model Master brand Light Gray and just basically dumped one bottle of each into a larger mixing bottle and shook it up, and I had a 50-50 mixture. And I applied it, and it gave just the right coloring I was looking for. I mean, the Falcon is not like a cool gray shade like the Imperial ships tend to be. Cool shade meaning having a little bit of a bluish tint, and it's modelers I've seen that have done Falcons in Camouflage Gray, for some reason it looks a little too brown. Camouflage Gray is classified as a warm gray, meaning it has a little bit of a tan shade in there. But the beauty of it is you mix the two colors together, it gives just the right appearance. It's a slight warm gray, but it's not too over the top, in my opinion. And that's what I settled on for the base shade. For the detail panels, there are some panels on the model, and the FineMolds instructions doesn't even list the coloring. There are some areas on the model that are painted. Now, let me see if I can move this back just a tick. You can see it pretty well up just in front of the turret bay. There are some panel colors that are actually a little bit darker, and for those I took a 50-50 mixture of Camouflage Gray and mixed it with Flat Gull Gray. Both Federal Standard colors, both available in the Testors Model Master paint lines. Also available in most any other paint line that you can find that uses FS colors. And it yielded a pretty good shade. So I went with that. Let me take a quick break, rearrange the model, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the detailing I did. After I applied the paint shades and the main detail colors, I mean the dark gray patches are neutral gray, specifically two shades of neutral gray. Neutral gray is a World War II color used on the bottom of U.S. Army Air Force bombers at the time, and there's a little bit of a different interpretation as to how dark it should be or how light it should be. The majority of these gray panels, here, 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 etc., are painted with Testors neutral gray, Testors Model Master neutral gray, but in some areas, such as the darker gray patches on the turret, I went with Tamiya acrylic neutral gray because it's a darker shade, and doing that gives a nice little, kind of like a little quick at a glance bit of weathering. These areas, right, the oxide red areas right here, which are kind of like a primer oxide red color, I used Testors Rust mixed with a few drops of red. I don't know if I necessarily had to mix the few drops of red. I did it anyway. After those panel colors were down, my next step was to apply a very thin down light wash over the model of, to me, a clear smoke. And the reason why I did that is it popped out some of the detailing, plus also the fact that since I had 2 layers of base coat down, it did kind of obscure some of the pre-shading I had in areas. Although black pre-shading, especially along the sides here and the little recesses, does still tend to pick out really nice. And that's the way most studio modelers used to do it for the movie industry. Typically, I mean, especially ILM. Typically, they would paint the model in a black shade, then they would go over the top with some other base color. And for some of the models in Star Wars, they actually rubbed them with steel wool. They went with like a white flat coat, and then they rubbed over the top to get that white to get a little more transparent and turn more gray shaded. And you could do that. Seems like a lot of work compared to actually mixing the shades, and I'm pretty happy with how mine turned out.